Welcome to Lifetime Talks and our series on performance and longevity with MIORA. I'm Jamie Martin, and in this episode, I'm joined by Lifetime's Chief Science Officer, Jim LaValle, and we are talking immune health. A strong immune system is essential for health, especially as we age. Everyday factors shape our immune health, including stress, exercise, sleep, nutrition, and more. In this episode, we're going to cover the many influences on the immune system and offer practical insights for boosting your immune health. Jim, thanks for being back with me.
It's always good to be here with you.
All right, we're going to dive right in. So, we hear a lot about the role of how stress and cortisol affect our bodies on a day to day basis.
Sure.
How specifically do they affect our immune health?
Well, so cortisol, basically, when you're under chronic stress and you're pumping out a lot of cortisol ends up shifting your immune system. There's two sides to your immune system. You can almost think of it as like a seesaw. There's the Th1 side, which is natural killer cells and T killer cells, go fight the good fight.
Yeah.
And then the Th2 side is acquired immunity. So when you, say, get sensitive or allergic to something, or you're triggering chronic inflammation, that's the Th2 side. So what
Okay.
cortisol does is it tends to shift you towards the Th2 side. So more allergies, more sensitivity, more inflammatory signaling. And basically, when you get under stress, your T killer cells, they kind of sit around. They're a little lazy. They don't want to fight the good fight. So when you
Okay.
get a virus, and now your body can't fight it off as well. And that's why you hear about it all the time, that when you're under stress, that you're less effective at fighting off that cold or flu.
Okay, got it. So that's in one way, like the how stress hinders us with the immune health. I mean, we need a certain amount of good stress in our bodies, right? So what about that? I mean, because again, is that when the killer cells, the Th1s, come out and help? Because when we have that, that cut on our hand or whatever that looks like.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, once again, cortisol's good.
Yeah.
And when cortisol's good, your immune system is imbalanced, the seesaw's imbalanced.
Yep.
And so you need an appropriate immune response to a bug. You need an appropriate immune response to an injury. Those are acute things that happen, right? So that's when you really want your immune system to kind of shift into high gear and then attack or repair, right? But in the end, what's supposed to happen is that you turn off that signal and your body goes back to homeostasis, basically being in balance, not thinking that it has to fight or attack anything,
Right. Okay. So we put good stress on our body in the form of exercise.
right?
What does that look like for our immune system?
Well, it's interesting because, we've said this before in previous episodes, the harder you train, the more you need to recover. The harder you train, the more difficult it is for your immune system to recover. And in fact, you can push your immune system to where you're less resilient. So one of the key things of overtraining syndrome is less resiliency to colds and flu.
Mm.
So that's one of the things you can find out if you're training too hard and you notice all of a sudden this cold and flu season, you're getting sick and holding on to that bug too long. Well, then you should take a look at that. The interesting thing about moderate exercise, and look, I like to train hard.
Yeah.
I've learned that I should have hard days and I should have easy days. And that's the value of having measurements,
Yep.
like resting heart rate and heart rate variability and all those things. Moderate exercise actually improves immune function. So that's why it's good to really track. Well, if I'm exercising, am I training at my best performance capacity, getting the most potential gains, and at the same time keeping my body as resilient as possible,
Right.
right? It's that combination of things that we're really looking for. So it's kind of important to do a self-evaluation and understand, am I pushing too hard? Because remember, you're layering this for most of us. We're layering the stress of our workday and our families and our, everything about our daily lives are being layered on top of the fact that we like to exercise,
Yes, we
right?
need to move our bodies. That's
Right?
part of it, right? And like to your point, if we go too hard, how do those additional layers of stress add up as
That's
a
exactly
whole,
right.
right?
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
So what are some signs that we might be overtraining, that it's too much? You already mentioned kind of HRV and resting heart rate, but let's talk through some of those things that could be indicating that we're going too hard, like
Oh,
some actual measurements we can use.
sure. Well, probably the most important things are first how you're feeling. So
Yeah.
one would be, as we mentioned, more propensity towards colds and flus.
Hmm.
I'm more prone for that. Two would be changes in mood.
Mm,
You can start to get flat. You could become anxious. You could get agitated. Right. So changes in mood. Fatigue,
yeah.
a big one. Sleep disturbance is a big one. And the big one that's been in the literature over the last 2 years, finally, we're doing research on this, is you get shifts in the microbiome.
Mm,
And so you can start to create what's called dysbiotic flora, more unfriendly flora. And that can start to change things like, hey, I'm getting gassy, I'm getting bloated, maybe getting loose stools.
hmm.
Those types of things can occur. And you always have to remember when you shift gut health, by default, since 70% of your immune system is in your gut,
Right.
you're going to be shifting immune health as well. So, what could you look at in terms of markers,
Mm,
for, hey, my immune system is off? Well, there's a few things. First, you can look at your neutrophils, which are a part of your white blood cell count. And there's a neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio where you're looking at neutrophils, one component to
okay.
your immune system, and then lymphocytes, another component. And that ratio is supposed to be somewhere around 1.7 to 2 to 1.
Okay.
If you're really pushing hard, and your neutrophils are starting to go down, that's starting to mean you're putting your body in a chronic immune stress. So
Mm,
that's one.
okay.
The other one that I talk about all the time and educate on is something called the monocyte eosinophil and basophils. That's a lot. I know.
That is a mouthful of stuff to
I
try and
know.
remember. Okay, got it.
And I
Monocyte,
got it all out. It was great. I call it MEBs just to make it easy.
MCVs. I'm gonna write that
And it
down.
and
I
it
like that.
turns out that you can use it's called a differential for those because you're getting a percentage of them. As your eosinophils go up, that's kind of related to allergies and sensitivities. And
Okay.
remember, when your cortisol is going high, you push towards that.
Yeah.
So you can look at the eosinophil percent count and go, wait a second, that's trending high. I really don't have any allergies yet, but you know what? I'm starting to feel sensitive to a food. That could mean that gut permeability has been changing, and now you're starting to have a little bit more of that type of reaction where you're getting, the antigen presenting cells are getting presented dust or mold or pollen or almonds or broccoli, whatever,
Yep.
and you're reacting. So that's eosinophils.
Okay.
And basophils are a great marker to find out, are you making more inflammatory cytokines, right? So you've
Mhm.
got pro-inflammatory cytokines, anti-inflammatory cytokines. You don't want to make too many pro-inflammatory ones because that
Yeah.
means that your body, once again, is in that low brush fire state, right? That
Yep.
silent inflammation that's going on.
Mhm.
And then monocytes are really important because as you crank up those monocytes actually activate another immune cell component. I know this sounds complicated,
I know.
and that's because it is.
Yep.
But but really, you can understand it pretty simply when you think of, I'm pushing my body hard. I start making more monocytes,
Yep.
and monocytes can lead to making macrophages. And you hear about
Yes.
macrophages because they go out and they attack things and digest them. But you make, once again, pro-inflammatory macrophages and
Yeah.
anti-inflammatory macrophages. So when you're making pro-inflammatory macrophages, well, that means you're putting your body in a position to chronically drive inflammation, which is a big component of your immune system.
Right.
So, when we think of our immune system, I think a lot of times, and I think COVID changed the thought process on this. People were much more engaged. When I was talking about the immune system 10 years ago, everybody was falling asleep.
And
Yeah,
now we've heard some like
th-
cytokines. We've heard of that. A lot of people because of
that's it.
COVID, right? What
No,
happened?
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
People got aware of their
Yes.
immune system.
Mhm.
And so, we have that immune response as it relates to, hey, am I fighting off colds and flus? And of course, as we age, one of the top 5 causes of death in the elderly is when they get a cold or a flu,
Hmm.
right? Because their immune system's kind of been worn down through aging and maybe they haven't worked on their immune health. And so that's one piece. And then that other piece of the immune system is regulating that chronic buffering of inflammation signaling based on stress, work, workout,
Right.
sleep or not enough sleep. Am I exposed to anything? And all of those things kind of create the world of your immunity.
Yep.
And so your immune system is really at the central focus of how we're going to age.
Mm.
A lot of people don't think of their immune
Right.
system as that. They're thinking, hey, it's my hormones or, gee, it's my blood sugar. It's all of that
Yeah.
because all of that gets influenced by your immune system.
Yep.
But the immune system sits in the center of why for example, people hear the term telomeres,
Yep.
why our telomeres get shortened as we're aging is because
Yep.
of triggering inflammation due to our immune response. And then those telomeres shorten,
Right.
right? So it's really important for us to understand that, you want to understand your immune system. You want to nourish your immune system. You want to make it an active partner in your health.
Absolutely. Well, I think what you just said is so important because we've had dedicated episodes to inflammation. That's been a standalone episode, but understanding that like the immune system is where some of that information is triggered. To your point, it's central to all of this. And so in many ways it's like it feels like that's again another foundational piece. It's like how do we begin to take care of our immune system?
Right.
Before we get to that, you mentioned the neutrophils to lymphocyte ratio and you mentioned the MEBs, which I'm just going to keep it short there. But how do we even begin to measure those? I mean, obviously there's testing that you can request, but what would be is that something that you can just go to your healthcare provider and ask for? It's not something I feel like I've personally heard about. So is it something that you have to
Yeah.
request?
Actually, it's a part of most blood tests.
Like
The
the
standard blood
standard?
test, yeah, you get what's called a CMP, a
Yep.
comprehensive metabolic panel,
Yep.
and then you get something called a CBC,
Yes, that's what I was thinking of.
right? And so when you get the CBC, if you don't ask for a CBC with a differential, you won't get the percent monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils.
Got it.
You'll just get a total of those.
Okay.
And when you're calculating the neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio, you are using the total.
Okay.
But then you want to look at that extra value. I can tell you right now, the MEB side of looking at the monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils, probably one of the most important things that I look at for individuals.
Interesting.
Because the higher it goes, the more reactive actually your immune system is. And I usually tell people add the three of them up. And if you can keep that number of the three of those together, around 10, you're probably in pretty good shape. Now, how that changes a little bit, any one of those numbers could be high,
Right.
which would tell you, uh-oh, there's a clue there, right?
Yeah.
That's a breadcrumb on the trail. Uh, and so the total number may be 10, but maybe your eosinophils are 5 or 6, and that's kind of high. And that's telling us that you're starting to get that immune reaction coming from your gut.
Got it. Okay. So those are the things that we can clue in and be able to ask for a little bit more detail around, or even if you, when you get those results, so often, I'm just going to go here for a second, is like you get those results in a, you get it in
Get a lab
email
result.
or in a lab result, or you log into the portal and you're like, oh, there are my results. It says it's normal, right? Like, I think
Right.
that's the opportunity. Like, it- I don't want to decipher that and like assume something based on that, which I think is important in terms of why working with a healthcare provider and a really connected and having a relationship with your healthcare provider so you can have the conversations.
Yeah, it's I think it's essential. I think for
Yeah,
so long people get a call back, and if your numbers aren't out of bounds, the answer you get is your labs are normal and
exactly.
that's it,
Yep.
right? And normal isn't optimal. Normal isn't ideal. Normal just means you don't have an illness yet.
Yeah.
Now, I wrote a book, gosh, back in 2013. Actually, the second edition will come out this year, called Your Blood Never Lies.
Mm,
And that basically goes through lab tests and what do they mean. And then I think more importantly, I think you bring up the point, you need to have a partner in your health,
yes.
somebody that you're checking in regularly with. If you're really interested in health span,
Mm-hmm.
You want to dial your chemistry in to be the best it can be. That's where having a partner, like what the programs we've developed at MIORA, and having practitioner oversight and being able to have the relationship where you have questions, you can get those answers, and you're tethered, right? You're tethered to that provider in our group so that, you're really reaching for your best possible health in an organized way.
Absolutely. It makes such a huge difference to be able to reach out, send a message, ask a question if there's something of concern or something that you just aren't sure about.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
huge.
That's right.
So, two other measurements, I know we talked a little bit about using our devices
Sure.
to give us information.
Sure.
One of them that we've talked about is like the HRV and the resting heart rate. How can those potentially clue us in to where we are at from an immune health standpoint?
Yeah, great. That's a great point. So when you think of why do we measure HRV, why do we measure resting heart rate? Well, one of it is how fit are you,
Yeah.
right? And the more fit you are, turns out the better your immune system is going to perform. And so we know that as your resting heart rate goes up, your sympathetic nervous system is dominating you, right? So
Mhm.
your adrenaline and noradrenaline versus your acetylcholine, your parasympathetic nervous system,
Right.
you get out of balance, and that shift towards the sympathetic nervous system dominance has a direct effect on immune function,
Got it.
right? So that's why when you train, and if your heart rate goes up 10% from one day to the next,
Hmm.
that's a clue that, you know what, you pushed yourself pretty hard. And maybe today you should dial it down a little bit, do a different kind of exercise. Maybe that's, hey, you know what, I haven't taken a Pilates, you know,
Yeah.
training in a while. I haven't done yoga. I didn't do a good stretch in a long time. I
Hmm.
didn't take a zone 2 walk,
Yeah.
right? It's adapting to what your body is telling you.
Hmm.
And obviously, when your HRV goes down, that's another sign that you're stuck more in sympathetic dominance. And once again, that sympathetic dominance is a pro-inflammatory state.
Yeah.
So when your blood pressure's slightly high and your cortisol's high and your heart rate's going up and your heart rate variability is going down,
Yeah.
you're in a pro-inflammatory state. Versus when you have good heart rate variability, your heart rate is staying solid in the, low 60s, 50s.
Yeah.
I pride myself on, getting down in the 40s here and there, that's where okay, I'm managing my exercise so I get optimal performance, optimal recovery, and most importantly, optimal resiliency for my immune function.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And what I love about that is, again, I'm not going to go get my CBC panel done probably maybe twice a year at most for most people.
That's right.
But if I'm wearing my watch of it, like a smartwatch of any sort, they're now starting to track those things. So that can be kind of my regular clue into maybe where my health, like where things are at for me. And if I can use that to inform, again, my next step, what I'm going to do tomorrow or today versus tomorrow or yesterday, like that's huge for me to have that data.
Oh, I think it's essential. I
Yeah.
love the wearable, revolution that's taking
Yeah.
place because people start to gain awareness of
Mhm.
what they're doing
Yeah.
and how it's impacting their body.
Yeah.
And I mean, before it was like, hey, I go and get a blood test once a year.
Right.
And maybe you had a trainer who was looking at your heart rate, and
Yeah.
maybe you had a heart rate variability band, you got the Polar H10 on,
Yep.
and you're looking at that. And that was being very forward thinking as little as 5 years ago.
Right.
If you think about how quickly the wearable
Mhm.
revolution is just taking off
Absolutely.
and getting more and more metrics to your health, it's fantastic to be able to do it. I do put a caveat to it.
Yeah.
You don't want to be freaked out about it,
Right.
right?
Don't let it
Like,
rule you.
don't let it
Yeah.
rule
Yeah.
you. Don't have it be a situation where, oh my God, my heart rate went up 2 points.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that it's a tool
Mhm.
and it's an informative tool and it's going to help you to guide immune health.
Mhm.
And, one of the big ones on immune health, which we didn't mention so far, is it's sleep.
Yeah.
There was there was a statistic that came out. Oh God, it had to be 10 years ago. or more for that matter, that if you sleep 5 hours a night, you're 9 times more likely to get a cold or flu. Wow. And there's
That's
a lot
significant.
and what we don't know is a lot of that gray area between, "Hey, I'm getting sick."
Yep.
We do kinda know that that 7 to 9 hours is repeatedly in the literature that says, "Hey, look, if you can get 7 to 9 hours
Yeah.
of restful sleep." But I gotta tell you, I ask that question no matter where I go and speak. I mean, I don't care whether it's a room full of doctors, a room full of consumers, room full of plumbers, it doesn't matter. They all of a sudden are I ask the question, "How many people in the room get 7 to 9 hours of restful sleep, don't wake up in the middle of the night, and wake up rested, refreshed, and ready to go for the next day?" And you might get 1 or 2 hands go up.
Yeah. You're like,
So
these are the healthcare providers, right? In many
exactly.
cases, you're like, we all need more sleep.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh man. Okay. So how can we support a healthy gut then? I mean, from a nutrition standpoint, potentially, because I know that there's certain things we can do from a more targeted supplementation standpoint to really start to support healthy gut, healthy immune system.
Sure. So a couple basic ones are vitamin C. You need vitamin C because vitamin C fuels your white blood cells when you get a cold or flu bug. You use
Okay.
it up. The other one is glutamine. Glutamine's
Yeah.
actually very important. It's an amino acid. It helps maintain the integrity of your mucosal barrier and the kind of the thickness of those epithelial cells or the cells that line the intestine. And remember, those cells are only one cell layer thick.
That always amazes me when I hear that stat. That's tiny.
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 Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's thinner than a hair.
Mm.
And then you think of that's the same for the brain
Yeah.
because the immune system in the brain, super important. And that's why we end up with problems there.
Yeah.
And glutamine, it turns out, helps with the integrity of these barriers and helps with something called heat shock protein 70. Which is an immune, it just helps create immune response.
Okay.
And so, vitamin C, glutamine, kind of easy to understand.
Yep.
Using things to chronically support your immune system versus when you get sick, right? They're
Yes.
two different things.
Yeah.
Things like echinacea, golden seal, elderberry extract, very popular.
Yep.
Those are great when you feel something coming on. And the earlier you feel something coming on, the quicker you want to jump on those type of remedies
Yeah.
because they stimulate the immune system. But you don't want to stimulate the immune system all the time. So it's
Right.
not like you take echinacea as a preventative.
Right.
You take it when you feel something coming on. Compounds like colostrum.
Mm.
So colostrum is great for the immune system as it relates to the gut, helps build a healthy mucosal barrier. You know, that's a great supplement that you would consider on a daily basis,
Yeah.
right? And then Moducare is another one. It's a plant sterol and sterilant. It feeds immune cells and helps keep your immune system, that seesaw of Th1 and
Yeah.
Th2, in balance.
Okay.
All right. So that's a really good. And then, of course, you get to the gut. And one of the main things that can help that is probiotics. Turns out that probiotics will reduce the incidence and severity of colds and flus and
Mm.
helps build a healthy immune response in your gut. And then, of course, when you're taking a probiotic, you want to think about taking prebiotics, which basically come in the form of fiber, because the fiber is going to help feed the
Oh,
probiotics. So
yep.
now you keep keep your microbiome healthy between taking fiber, taking probiotics. That's another great strategy for immune health. And then obviously look at your vitamin D levels.
Yep.
Uh,
Critical.
Your vitamin D is critical, and most people that I see, I mean, it doesn't matter where they live. I mean, we think, oh, they live in a sunny state, they don't need vitamin D. That's not the case.
Right.
So get your vitamin D levels checked. Typically, that's done now with everybody, and consider being on vitamin D and just getting it to an optimized level. Once again, some people overdo it. That's not a good thing.
Right.
You really should get your levels checked for that. And then you could think about the last thing on gut health. I mean, what's been real popular over the last, oh, I don't know, especially the last 5 years, are peptides.
Mm-hmm.
So, peptides are this emerging area. They've been around for 100 years in terms of pharmaceutical science. The first
Yeah.
peptide was insulin,
Yeah.
100 years ago. but there's peptides that can help support immune health.
Okay.
So that's great. And then you can think of the old standards that are great in terms of, botanicals, things like grapefruit seed extract, helps to knock off the unfriendly bugs, populate the good bugs. Cat's claw, which everybody kind of laughs, is it really cat's claw? No,
Yeah.
it's not. It's a vine. And it's one of the big immune support products for the gut. So it's really great at helping to support immune function in the gut. So, I mean, that's a
Okay.
pretty big variety of things that you can be doing.
Yeah, well, and I love that you kind of broke it down between, like, here's the kind of what you're doing on a consistent basis, but then there's some more targeted things when you feel that first kind of sign of the cold or the compromised immune system happening, right?
Exactly.
Okay. This is all about longevity and performance, right? So I want to make sure that we talk about how immunity changes as we age. You alluded to this earlier. We talked about it briefly, but I
Sure.
think it's important to talk about why it shifts and what's happening on a physiological level in our bodies.
Sure. So if we go back to one of our earlier talks and we think of metabolic inflammation.
Yeah.
So metabolic inflammation can be caused by environmental burden. So, we get exposed to things. It can be caused by stress. It can be caused by blood sugars, alterations, diet, right? Exercise, all those different things that lack of sleep's a biggie.
Yeah.
All those different things that then start to trigger the pathway of inflammation. So as we're aging, obviously we have the burden of all those years that we've lived
Yeah.
and the exposures and the stresses and all of those things. And so as your body starts to move towards shifting in that inflammatory state,
Mhm.
your immune system is what takes the brunt of that. So it is responding and releasing more of the inflammatory compounds that damage your DNA, damage your cell membrane,
Yeah.
right? Creates neuroinflammation in the brain. So as you're aging, you're kind of, I always call it raging against aging, right?
Mhm.
That's what we're trying to do, right?
Right.
So as you're aging, it's that process of, I- I've had years of wear and tear
Yep.
on my neuroendocrine immune relationships. And that process starts to kind of almost be, it depends. If you remember, I said aging is a disease.
Mhm.
So the more that you can push back and balance your immune system as you're aging,
Yeah.
you don't suffer that path
Right.
towards being more prone to illnesses, more prone to autoimmunity,
Right.
right? Because that's a big area, right? Autoimmune disorders are, a big, big problem in our country, and they're on the rise.
Yes.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've really done a great job at disrupting our microbiome. Even, Dr. Fasano's work out of Harvard,
Yeah.
he's published multiple papers, showing the correlation to the gut, the immune system, and then eventual autoimmunity, right?
Yep.
And so I think it's just important to realize that in general, as we age, and if we're not proactive with our health, our body will slowly or rapidly devolve into an inflammatory state. And
Got
that's
it.
called inflammaging. Aging.
Yep.
Inflammation leads to inflammaging.
Yep.
And so our job is to really figure out for each of us, what are the strategies that we're willing to do in our daily lives? Everybody's got a different level of commitment, right?
Right. What's your willingness to
Yeah,
take on
what's
these
your
things?
willingness to take on these things so that you can live the best life you can as long as you can?
Absolutely. So let's talk about just briefly a few of those proactive things we can do because I know we've talked about already some of the supplementation, some of the
Sure.
nutrition choices we can make. There's also things like sauna and red light and PEMF. Like what about some of those additional things that we can incorporate into our lives to support immune health?
Sure. Yeah, so some things that you could do. I mean, PEMF or PEMF is I think is fantastic. It's been around quite a while. I think I got my first PEMF machine 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and when it wasn't very common. And so what that's doing is it's creating a electromagnetic field that's actually strengthening your mitochondria
Mm,
and decreasing the signals of inflammation in your tissues.
got it.
So PEMF is pretty exciting, actually.
That's awesome.
Love red light therapy. We know there's lots of studies that are now coming out showing that red light therapy helps to push you out of the pro-inflammatory side back into the anti-inflammatory side, especially as it relates to aging and collagen in your
Oh, yeah.
skin, right? I mean, red light therapy is terrific because our skin's a great indicator of free radical damage and what's happening with our immune system, right?
Yep.
And so that's important. People are doing cold plunges, for example, if they like to do them. I'm not a big cold plunge fan personally, but I do know they're good.
Mhm.
There's some great literature. I think once again, anything we tend to do this in our country. Anything worth doing is worth overdoing.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're meant to cold plunge every day, but incorporating cold plunge. Now, if you have a condition like Raynaud's, which
Mhm.
a lot of women have Raynaud's, some men have Raynaud's, that's where you get spasming in your
Yep.
peripheral blood flow under cold. You, you don't want to do cold plunge.
Right.
But for other people, it's great because it somewhat resets the immune system, right? It's a shock
Yep.
that helps to reset the immune system and get you out of that pro-inflammatory state, drive parasympathetic tone, get out of that sympathetic tone. So cold plunging, great. Cryotherapy's got some great evidence to
Yep.
it. And look, just get a massage.
Mhm.
Break up
Move
the
things.
fascia,
Yep.
right? Because the fascia, when it gets twisted and torqued and compressed, now all of a sudden we're not moving oxygen into our tissues, which is going to accelerate our aging and activate our immune system
Yep.
because we're not getting out the waste products of our metabolism out of our muscle tissue. So there's a lot that you can do. And I'm still going to lean back into, and I know we're going to talk about sleep specifically, but one of the biggest things people can do to support their immune health is to get a good night's sleep. And I know that's easier said than done because we're busy. We've got a lot of light pollution. So now we've got, people are wearing their blue light blockers and they're wearing Faraday glasses and all these good things. And I'm going to still lean back into just make sure it fits into your lifestyle and that doesn't become a hassle,
Right.
right? It's like, oh my gosh, I've got to do my cold plunge today. And then I got to go do my red light. Make it a part of your lifestyle. That's why I've always liked, Lifetime is the healthy way of life
Yeah.
company, right? Which
It's not like
is
the trend for this moment, right?
no, it's what are you going to incorporate? What resonates with you? Even things like Normatec boots, being able to, get blood flow back into your, lower limbs after exercise. All of these things have a role to play. And look, don't forget the single biggest thing that triggers inflammation in your body, which is, of course, immune disruption, are those big swings in blood sugar that occur if you're taking in too much sugar, taking in too many carbs, and just you're sensitive to that swing,
Yep.
that's gonna be a big trigger. So, diet's huge, using tools, like red light therapy, like sauna, you know, great, cold plunge, all of those great therapies, but you gotta make sure you're grounded in those basics of good sleep, manage stress, eat a healthy diet, and when I say that, it's just eat a diet that's not gonna swing your blood sugars like crazy.
Right. It's back to the many pillars that we talk about on repeat in many cases because it's
Exactly.
why they're so important. That's why we do it. Okay, my last question is kind of tied to the future of stuff because I know one thing you alluded to is the role of stem cells
Oh,
potentially when it comes to immune health. So I want to just touch on that briefly.
sure. So, stem cells have been out for a while. The biggest problem with stem cells so far has been inconsistency.
Mhm.
So, you can get stem cells from a lot of different ways, right? The doctor may take it out of your fat and then spin them down and generate stem cells. There's umbilical stem cells. There's placental stem cells.
Yep.
There's exosomes. Uh, but the future, I mean, Florida just passed, being able to use stem cells. So
Mhm.
it's coming
Yeah.
in healthcare. And right now, I think what's happening with stem cells, because where they have benefit is this they give you back some immune function in an aging immune system.
Mm.
And your aging immune system could be accelerated. You don't have to be 70 to have an aging immune system, right?
Right.
I mean, we saw that with the past pandemic that we had that
Yes.
Young people still are, battling long haul, for
Yes.
example, or you could be exposed to a virus or, mold, water damaged buildings, right? All these things can be creating issues around immune function. So stem cells, I think, are the next horizon as we are able to standardize and normalize. Okay, here are what are acceptable stem cells
Okay.
for therapy, right? And I think it's super exciting. I know you asked me to write a little piece on stem cells, so
Yes.
I was kind of excited to do that because I do think it's one of the next horizons.
Yep, that's coming soon. We'll make sure to link to that when we get to it. So
Great,
I love that. I love being able to kind of look ahead and know like there's all these innovations happening and knowing it's still early days, but that there is this thing on the horizon that could really be supportive for our health in the
Ab-
long term.
absolutely.
So, all right, Jim, anything else to add before we sign off of this one?
No, I think we covered it pretty thorough.
I think we got it.
All right,
Okay, so if people want to learn more, they can visit miora.lifetime.life to learn about not only immune health, but all of these different topics around health and wellness that really support our longevity and performance. Thanks, Jim.
thanks for having me.